a look at the respective environments that we operate in.
So today we're going to learn about personality, the differences of personalities, and about relationships.
Hi, I'm Dr. Melanie Cohen. As you know, we live and work in a changing world, so learning is not just important to ensure that we keep up to date with the developments in our particular field. It's also important as a source of motivation, stimulation, job satisfaction, and employee engagement. We're excited to host a program that explores timely and pertinent topics such as the multi-generational workforce, the value of social media, the federal deficit, performance.
What I'm saying the opportunity is for us is actually to wrestle with and decide what the core values for HUD are, which I would suggest will mirror most of your own core values, but they also will serve the same role for us at HUD that they serve for you as an individual. They will help us make decisions about people, make decisions about the way we deal with one another, make decisions about choices between alternatives, make decisions about promotion, make decisions about discipline, all of those things that you use core values for in your own personal life.
We talked a little.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see all of you here today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jean Lynn Powell, the General Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Policy Development and Research. And welcome to our quarterly housing market update. And we're delighted to see all of you here, headquarters staff, as well as those who are viewing on the webcast. As you know, PD&R briefs staff on quarterly national and local housing market conditions, and we also have a topical piece in the form of a panel discussion on current research. Today's briefing will include an update of the third quarter national and local housing market conditions, and it's presented by our senior market economist, chief market economist, Kevin Kane. And we have a panel discussion that's titled Boomtown Effects of New Oil and Gas Exploration on Local Housing Markets. And we're very pleased to have our field economists and regional administrators. And I understand we also have a field office director that will be calling in to provide a presentation on significant growth conditions that are happening in these communities that are experiencing oil and gas exploration. And we'll also hear from the field leadership in terms of how these communities are addressing and responding to these conditions. Kurt Yuzowski, who is our Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Economic Affairs, will be moderating the panel, and he will also be fielding the Q&A portion of the panel. You can view this webcast. It's going to be archived on our HUD.gov as well as our HUDuser.org websites, and you can follow us on Twitter, #PD&R update. And if you have questions, please email them to pdrquarterlyupdate@hud.gov. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Kevin Kane, and he's going to make his presentation on the housing market conditions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, as always, I'd like to thank Randall Goodnight, one of our field economists in the Oklahoma City office, who helped put together all the maps that you'll see in my presentation this afternoon. Just a note about the maps, the color themes of the maps are all the same, where brown indicates worse off conditions or declines in a variable, and blue indicates better conditions or increases. Before we look at the housing market, let's take a look at the nation's economy. This first figure, once we get it up here, shows the year-over-year percentage change. Had a little technical difficulties, but it shows the year-over-year percentage change in non-farm payrolls since 2002. We look at both the 12-month and the 3-month averages through September of 2012. Moving forward, there should be a black line coming, which shows the 12-month year-over-year change, and a red line, which shows the 3-month year-over-year change. There we go. Non-farm payrolls are a measure of the number of jobs in the economy. The 12-month average in black shows an annual change and is a more stable measure of economic performance. The 3-month average change is a good indicator for where things are heading. During the 12 months ending September 2012, non-farm payrolls averaged nearly 132.8 million jobs. This was up 1.4%, or 1.8 million jobs from a year ago. And the 3-month average was also up by 1.4% from a year ago. Next slide here. For the 6th consecutive quarter, every region in the country added jobs relative to a year ago. You can see that the entire country was in blue. The western half of the country grew faster than the national average, with growth led by the Southwest and the Pacific at 2% each. The 6 regions in light blue grew at a rate that was slower than the national average, with the slowest growth in the Great Plains at 0.7%. In the next slide coming, the Northwest region grew by 1.5% during the 3 months ending September, and this map shows the growth at the metropolitan area level in the Northwest region. Those areas that were in the darkest blue grew by more than the national average, with 5 areas having growth rates above 3%, and that was led by Bellingham, Washington at 3.6%, and Seattle at 3.2%. The light blue areas added jobs at a rate that was below the national average. Jobs declined in 4 areas, and those are shown in the brown dots, led by a 2.2% drop in Kennewick, Pasco, Richland, Washington. In the next map, we see that the national unemployment rate was 8.1% during the 3rd quarter of 2012. This was down from 9.1% a year ago. The 7 regions in blue had a rate that was lower than the national rate. This was led by the Great Plains at 5.9%. The 3 regions in brown had a rate that was higher than the national average, led by the Pacific at 10%. And on a state level, North Dakota still has the lowest rate in the nation at 2.7%, followed by Nebraska at 3.8%, and Nevada has the highest rate in the country at 11.9%. In the next map, we see the change in the unemployment rate from a year ago. And on a national level, the unemployment rate during the 3rd quarter of 2012 was down 1% from a year ago. And the 5 regions in dark blue declined at a rate that was greater than the national decline. The largest decline occurred in the Pacific, which was down 1.6 percentage points, with the rate falling from 11.6% to 10%, and that was led by declines of 1.9 percentage points in Nevada and 1.6 percentage points in California. The rate declined in every region of the country except for New York, New Jersey, where it was up by 0.4 percentage points. So in the next slide, we're going to look at an overview of current housing market conditions. Sales conditions remained soft in much of the country, but they continue to improve. And just for a little bit of background, balanced conditions exist when the quantity of housing supplied equals the quantity demanded. Soft markets occur when the quantity of housing supplied exceeds the quantity demanded, and we have a housing surplus. And tight conditions occur when demand exceeds supply and we have a housing shortage. All three home price indices show that home sales prices increased during the third quarter of 2012 relative to the third quarter of 2011. Existing home sales increased by more than 5% during the 12 months ending September 2012. Inventories of new homes for sale were down 11% from a year ago, and they were down 21% for existing homes. And based on the current rate of home sales, there's a 4.6 month supply of new homes, and that compares with a 6.5 month supply a year ago. And there's a 6.1 months supply of existing homes, and this is down from an 8.5 month supply a year ago. The sales vacancy rate was 1.9% in the third quarter of 2012. That's down from 2.4% a year ago. Rental market conditions are balanced to tight throughout the country. They continue to tighten. An estimated 67% of new apartments that were completed during the second quarter of 2012 were absorbed within 3 months. This compares with a rate of 51% rate of absorption a year ago. And multifamily production increased by 52% during the third quarter of 2012 relative to a year ago. And in the next slide here, we're going to look at regional conditions across the country. These are assessments that are provided by our regional economists. Improvements in an area are shaded in blue, and declines in conditions are shaded in brown. Sales market conditions around the country continue to improve, although they remain soft in most areas. In New England and in the Rocky Mountains, conditions went from soft to slightly soft, and we're seeing improvements throughout the country. On the rental side, conditions continue to tighten in most markets, and in New England, conditions are now considered tight. In the Southeast, we had previously balanced conditions, are now considered to be balanced to tight. In the next slide, we look and we see that for the second consecutive quarter, all three price indices, and once again, we'll see 3 lines going across here, all 3 indices showed an increase relative to a year ago. And all of the indices increased at a higher rate compared with the increase that we saw last quarter. The Case-Shiller S&P index was up 3.6%, the FHFA index was up by 4%, and the CoreLogic index was up by 4.5%. The next map shows the change in the CoreLogic index by region from the third quarter of 2011 to the third quarter of 2012. These data are not seasonally adjusted, and they do include distressed sales. Nationally, again, the increase was 4.5%, with prices up or unchanged in every single region for the first time since we've been doing these briefings. Gains were led by a 9.6% increase in the Pacific, and they were followed by a 6.7% increase in the Rocky Mountain region, both which increased faster than the national average and are shown in the dark blue color. The Northwest, Southwest, Southeast, and Mid-Atlantic regions increased between 2 and 4.5%, and those are shown in the medium shade of blue. The rest of the nation increased by less than 2%, with prices unchanged in New England. And on a state level, the largest gains occurred in Arizona, which was up by 18%, and Idaho, which was up by 12%. Those were the only 2 states with a double-digit price increase. Rhode Island, Illinois, Connecticut, Alabama, New Jersey, and Wisconsin were the only states to decline, but those were all by less than 3%. According to the Census Bureau, the median price of a new home in the third quarter of 2012 was $242,900. This was up 9% from a year ago. And according to the National Association of Realtors, the median price of an existing home was $185,500. This was up 10% from a year ago. And in the next map, we see that this shows the price change in the Mid-Atlantic region at the metropolitan level during the third quarter of 2012. 16 of the 36 metropolitan areas in the region had a decline, although 14 of those areas declined by less than 3%. The most significant decline was in Dover, and that was down by 8%. Prices were up 4.5% in Washington, almost 4% in Pittsburgh, and nearly 2% in Richmond. And the largest increase in this region was in Danville, Virginia, at more than 7%. On the next slide, we're going to look at the foreclosure market. The foreclosure situation remained relatively unchanged in the third quarter of 2012. This map shows the percent of home loans that are 90 days or more delinquent, in foreclosure or in REO as of September 2012. And just to note, REO stands for real estate owned, which means that the lender now owns the property. The national average was 7.5% of all loans in those three categories. This was down from 7.7% a year ago. The three regions in the two shades of brown have a rate that's higher than the national average, while the other 7 regions are below the national average. The most dramatic changes from a year ago occurred in the Pacific, which was down by 1.9 percentage points, and New York, New Jersey, which was up by 1.4 percentage points, followed by New England, which was up by 0.7 percentage points. Arizona, California, and Nevada led the declines in the nation, down by 2.6, 1.8, and 1.8 percentage points respectively, and New York and New Jersey were up by 1.2 and 1.9 percentage points respectively. On the next map, we're going to look at regions 1 and 2 at the metropolitan level, and you can see that the percentage of distressed loans in every metropolitan area in these two regions increased during the past year. Right, in the next slide, we're going to start to look at home sales. So existing home sales increased by 5.4% during the 12 months ending September 2012, compared with the previous 12 months. Sales increased in 9 of the 10 regions, with double-digit increases in the Rocky Mountains and the New England regions, shown in the dark shade of blue. The Northwest, Midwest, Great Plains, and Southwest, in the medium blue, increased at a faster rate than the national average. And sales declined slightly in New York, New Jersey by less than 1%. And just to note something that's not shown on the map, new home sales were up by 26% in the third quarter of 2012 relative to a year ago. Looking closer at the Midwest region here in the next map, we see where sales are up 5.6%. Sales were up in 45 of the 55 metropolitan areas reported, and those are shown in blue. And just to highlight some of those changes, sales were up by 12% in Cleveland, 10% in Chicago, more than 5% in Detroit, and nearly 2% in Indianapolis. And in the next slide, we see single-family home building, as measured by building permits issued, increased 27% during the third quarter of 2012 to 127,700 homes. Single-family home building increased in every region of the country, with gains ranging from 15% in New York, New Jersey, to 55% in the Pacific. In the next slide now, we're going to see multifamily production. And the number of multifamily units permitted was up by 52% to 78,550 units produced during the third quarter of 2012. This number of multifamily units permitted was up in every region except for the Great Plains and the Mid-Atlantic, where things remained relatively unchanged. Increases ranged from 27% in the Rocky Mountain region to 119% in the Southeast. Rental market conditions in the next slide here continue to tighten around the country. According to REIS data, which covers 200 market areas, vacancy rates were down in 176 market areas, and they were up or unchanged in 24 market areas. The average vacancy rate for all areas covered declined by 1 percentage point, from 5.6% last year to 4.6% in the third quarter of 2012. There were 8 market areas in the country with a decline of 2 percentage points or more, and those are shown in the dark shade of brown. According to the Census Bureau, for the entire U.S., the rental vacancy rate was 8.6% in the third quarter of 2012. This was down from 9.8% a year ago. In the next map here, we're going to take a closer look at the New York, New Jersey region. Vacancy rates were down in 8 of the 10 areas reported, led by a decline of 1.3 percentage points in Atlantic City, Cape May, and that's shown in the medium shade of brown, with the other 7 areas having modest declines. The only area with an increase in the vacancy rate was Albany, New York, and that was up by less than 1%, shown in blue, and the rate was unchanged in Westchester. And now take a look at market rents. Market rents were up by an average of 2.9% nationally in the markets covered by Reese from the third quarter of 2011 to the third quarter of 2012. Areas in light blue increased at a rate that was less than the national rate. In dark blue, they increased faster than the national rate, and those areas in brown had declines in rents. The average market rent in the third quarter of 2012 for the 200 areas was $1,091. This compares with $1,060 last year. Rents increased in 197 of the market areas reported. Rents increased by 3% or more in 27 of those market areas, shown in the dark blue. And this was led by increases of 5.9% in San Francisco, 4.5% in Seattle, and 4.3% in San Jose. And now we're going to take a closer look at the Southeast region. The only 3 areas in the country with rent declines were in the Southeast. And these included Fort Myers, Florida, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Athens, Georgia, and the rent declines were all by less than 1%. Rents were up in the other 45 metropolitan areas of the region, and in some of those areas the increase was by 3% or more, and that included Birmingham, Charleston, Chattanooga, Lexington, and Nashville. And so, in conclusion, year-over-year job growth for the third quarter of 2012 was 1.4%. Sales markets generally remained soft in the third quarter of 2012, although we continue to see improvements throughout the country. Prices and sales were both up again this quarter. Rental market conditions are balanced to tight throughout the nation, and those conditions continue to tighten, with rents continuing to rise and vacancy rates continuing to fall. For additional information, you can go to the third quarter 2012 U.S. Housing Market Conditions Report. You can talk with your local regional or field economist, or you can feel free to contact me. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kurt Yasowski, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Economic Affairs, who will be overseeing the discussion on the oil and gas team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Seems to be more good news every time you come up on the stage, so that's encouraging. Our next panel, the panel we have today, is going to be talking about the boomtown effects of oil and gas exploration on local housing markets. This is an issue we've been looking at for probably about 18 months. Seriously in my office. The first indications of it were complaints regarding fair market rents in certain rural areas that had oil and gas activity. They started coming from Texas, that the voucher programs weren't working. So after that, we were looking at the issues here, and we thought, well, we better take a closer look. We got a field task force together, task force of field economists, 2 of whom are here today. They were selected by the group to come and present what they found as they studied it. I would like to start with, where do I have to point this? With a little basic economics. You have to use PowerPoint because chalk is no longer on the GSA schedule. And an economist always will start with drawing demand and supply curves, looking at this market would be a rental market, rent and units, and a supply curve. Now this is a short-run supply curve, and what you see about it is that it has this L shape, backwards L shape. In the short run, if demand for housing slips, units don't go away, they just kind of come off of them, they're just unoccupied. Rents will go down a little bit. When a housing market is very tight in the short run, rents can start to rise very rapidly, and we get into sort of this chaotic zone here where the curve is almost straight up and down. You have some notion of the stock that we count. There's always a definitional issue here. What constitutes a habitable unit? And as I said, when you get to a point where we start to be blurring that definition of a habitable unit as part of the supply, sort of that chaotic zone up there. And you know, in an average market, you have some gap between the units that are actually being occupied, where demand, the D0 curve, intersects the supply curve at a particular rent. And the gap between the stock that we measure and what is actually occupied are the vacant units. So if we have an upward shift in demand, and demand is determined by the number of households that are in an area and how much money they have. If you have an upward shift in demand or a leftward shift in demand, the vacancy rate goes down, rents go up a little bit. We can go back and forth there and see that. Now, what happens in some of these areas that are impacted by gas and oil is you have a very large influx of people coming into an area relative to the size of the population, and they have a lot of money. They're making more money than the average person who already lives there. They may have, in addition, a housing allowance paid by their employer that they can use to try to rent housing in the locality where they're working. And this drives us into that sort of chaotic region where supply becomes vertical, rents rise rapidly, and we start running into many of the problems that we're going to be discussing here today. So I'd like to introduce to you from our Gas and Oil Task Force, we have Sam Young, who's in the Region 8 office in Denver, and Timothy McNally, who's in our Philadelphia office. And then after, they're going to present on a little bit more information on why we're seeing all this tremendous new gas and oil resources coming online, where it's happening in the country, and what's going on in different housing markets around the country. Then we'll be hearing from some regional and field office directors. From Region 3, we have Jane Vincent. We'll have on the phone from the Columbus field office, Tom Leach. We'll have hear from Mark Brazina from Region 6 in Texas, where we first heard about our problem, and Rick Garcia from the Colorado office in Region 8, where there's a lot of activity, particularly in North Dakota. Gentlemen?
Good afternoon. I don't have any supply and demand curves, so you can relax a little bit. On behalf of the Gas Oil Task Force, we wanted to thank you for attending the presentation today. The task force currently consists of 9 EMAD field and headquarters staff, and it really grew out of EMAD's observation of housing market dislocations in areas that were experiencing increased oil and gas drilling activity. And we recently published a paper outlining the initial summary of our findings, and there's a link to the paper at the end of our PowerPoint. Again, my name is Sam, and my partner Tim McNally. We're going to talk for 15 or 20 minutes. We'll answer a couple of brief questions, and I know there's a Q&A at the end of the entire presentation. So before we begin, if you're on a live meeting, if you hit F5 on your keyboard, it will make the viewing area bigger and you won't miss anything. So if we can get to the PowerPoint part, I will begin. Oh, I do? Oh, I'm sorry. That's my fault. So if we see this picture, there's a lot going on, but the picture, the drill on the left highlights the older vertical wellbore technology, and then on the right is the newer horizontal and directional drilling well. And really, the horizontal and directional drilling, it allows a company to more closely follow an energy reserve, providing more contact area to drill, as you notice there in the bottom of the picture. In addition, the technology allows a company to re-drill new horizontal well bores from a single vertical well shaft and to change drilling direction as needed. If you're trying to visualize this, if you're looking at the drill from above, the vertical well bore shaft goes down, and the companies have the ability to go out like spokes on a wheel. They can go multiple directions and at multiple elevations throughout the play. And so then this next slide, again, it's a busy picture, so I apologize, but this technology highlighted here is hydraulic fracturing. The technique involves pumping large amounts of fluid into a wellbore to fracture the surrounding rock, if you notice down there in the bottom right corner of the slide. And the fracture is held open with sand grains, and then the oil and gas that's in the surrounding rock flows into that wellbore up and out to the surface, and it's transported. And it's really a combination of these two technologies that has increased the technically recoverable and economically recoverable oil and gas reserves in the U.S. In fact, United States oil production has increased 25% since 2008 and is expected to reach 8.5 million barrels per day in 2012. In the year 2000, shale gas was only 2% of U.S. natural gas production. Today it is 37%. Now, there are a couple of primary revenue streams from oil and gas. At the state level, severance taxes are the main form of revenue from oil and gas drilling. And a severance tax is a tax levied on the extraction, or literally the severing, of the resource from the earth. And that totaled $14.7 billion in 2011, which is a dramatic increase from the $4.9 billion in 1997. Federal leases of oil and gas exploration generated $9 billion in royalty revenue in the year 2009. Now, with regard to employment, according to a recent report by PricewaterhouseCoopers, the oil and natural gas industry supported 5.8 million indirect and induced jobs, and an additional 1.2 million indirect and induced jobs from capital investments made by the industry. That same year, those jobs generated $357 billion in labor income, and in value added from those indirect and induced jobs was an additional $616.7 billion. Now, the second bullet, oil and natural gas employment can be broken down into two broad categories, upstream and downstream employment. And upstream jobs are related to the exploration, drilling, and production of oil and natural gas, and the downstream jobs are focused on the transportation, distribution, and sale of those resources. The majority of the employment growth is experienced during the upstream activities, and this can cause a front-loaded bump in employment that may not be sustained through the entire energy boom cycle. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2011, approximately 186,300 people were employed in the upstream oil and gas extraction sector with an average hourly salary of $35.15. And that included more than 30,000 petroleum engineers with an average hourly salary of $66.82. And this is compared to the national average hourly earnings of $21.74 in 2011. Now, according to an IHS Global Insights report from October of this year, approximately 1.7 million unconventional and upstream jobs were in the entire sector in 2012, and that's expected to expand to 2.5 million by 2015. Now, this slide is a map highlighting the 8 oil and gas reserve areas that the task force is monitoring. The housing markets associated with these energy reserves are the areas that we're keeping a close eye on as we study the effects of energy exploration on local housing markets. Now, there are other areas where more recent exploratory drilling has occurred, but these are the areas that we're concentrating on for now. Now, the next slides will provide a brief overview of each of these 8 regions. And the first area here is the Bakken Reserve in North Dakota and Montana. Well drilling permits have increased in both states from a year ago, and while employment has also increased in both states, North Dakota has by far been the primary beneficiary of increased employment. As you can see, 12,650 job increase in North Dakota as opposed to 1,100 jobs in Montana. Now, the first oil refinery in the U.S. in the past 30 years has been approved by the Department of the Interior and will be located on the Fort Berthold Reservation, which is 125 miles east of Williston, North Dakota. And if you look on the map, Williston is very approximately where the E is in the word Bakken, just as a reference point. Now, this refinery is expected to have a production capacity of 13,000 barrels per day and is estimated to be complete near the end of 2014. McVeigh Elementary School in the town of Williston, North Dakota reopened for this school year, the 2012-2013 academic year, and they fully expected between 600 and 1,200 additional new students to come to the school, and that was based on new home construction estimates for the area. However, actual additional enrollment was substantially lower, with only about 250 students enrolling. Not all of the energy workers that are moving to the area are bringing their family with them when they come. Finally, again in Williston, North Dakota, within the city limits, they issued a 6-month moratorium on temporary housing, as permanent housing construction has increased in the area. And this will bring the town in line with the county, Williams County, where it's located, which already has an existing moratorium after they allowed approximately 9,000 temporary beds in the county. Now the next two areas are the Niobrara and Piceance Shale, largely in Colorado with some spillover into Utah and Wyoming. The Piceance area is largely a natural gas play, and drilling permits are declining. The low price for natural gas has caused some energy companies to move employees to North Dakota and some to shut down operations completely, as drilling is no longer economically viable in this area until prices increase again. Now, this has happened in the past in the Piceance area in Colorado. In the early 1980s, ExxonMobil moved in and began investing heavily in the region, and the state of Colorado published a housing needs analysis that estimated the area would need 126,000 new housing units in the area by the year 2000. Short time later, on May 7, 1982, the company closed its operations due to low energy prices, and the area went into a steep economic decline. At the time of the closure, 700 apartments and 650 homes were under construction, and that was in addition to the new housing already built for the 1,700 residents of Battlement Mesa, a new town that had basically been built from scratch. A year later, in 1983, the vacancy rate was 80%, rents had fallen by nearly half, and the population had dropped by 2/3. Now the second area, the Niobrara, it's part of the larger Denver-Julesburg formation, and it's largely an oil play at this point, and the influx of workers to the area has caused rents and occupancy rates to rise sharply in the last year. Now at this point, I'll turn it over to Tim McNally, and he'll complete the presentation.
Thank you, Sam. The Marcellus Shale Formation runs from southwestern New York to southern West Virginia and is largely a natural gas play. The development of this formation started in 2004 when the first hydraulically fractured well was drilled. Some experts are forecasting drilling to occur for the next 20 to 30 years. In Pennsylvania and West Virginia, drilling is largely occurring in rural areas. The Marcellus Shale Formation has been impacted by low natural gas prices. Well starts in Pennsylvania have declined substantially, and mergers and acquisition activity related to Marcellus decreased as well. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, during the third quarter of 2012, no mergers and acquisitions were completed, compared with deals valued at $1.6 billion completed during the second quarter of 2012. The Utica Shale Formation runs from New York to West Virginia and extends westward into portions of eastern Ohio. The Utica Shale Formation is geologically located beneath the Marcellus Shale Formation. According to recently released estimates from the U.S. Geological Survey, the Utica Shale contains 38 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 940 billion barrels of oil valued at more than $220 billion. This estimate is sensitive to both commodity prices and production costs. Development of the Utica Shale is in its early stages and is primarily occurring in Ohio, where the profitable oil and liquid natural gas byproducts are located. The Permian Basin Formation covers 20 counties in western Texas and eastern New Mexico and is an oil and gas play. While drilling began in 1925, recent technological advances mentioned in earlier slides has generated renewed interest in this formation. According to local analyst estimates, the rental market vacancy rate in the Permian Basin area is approximately 2%. The $2.4 billion Texas Clean Energy Project in Midland, Odessa will produce electricity using carbon capture technology and will employ 150 people. Scheduled to open in late 2014, the Texas Clean Energy Project will capture 90% of its carbon emissions, which will then be pumped into the wellbore to be used in the extraction process. The Eagle Ford Shale, located in South Texas, is an oil and natural gas play covering 14 counties. According to the Texas Railroad Commission, nearly 3,225 new permits were issued through September 2012, compared with approximately 2,825 permits in 2011. The increase in permitting activity is related to oil, not gas. natural gas production in the Eagle Ford area declined 3.7% during 2012 compared with 2011. According to a study by the University of Texas at San Antonio's Institute for Economic Development, the Eagle Ford Shale supported 38,000 full-time jobs in 2011. The Barnett Shale in northeastern Texas is a natural gas play covering 25 counties. Portions of this formation underlie the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area. While development of this formation started in 1982, the Barnett Shale has recently been impacted by low natural gas prices. New well permits declined by 30% compared with a year earlier. The impact that the development of the Barnett Shale is having on the local housing market is minimal because of the formation's relative proximity to the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area. This slide presents a few examples of the types of workforce housing available to oil and gas workers. Many workers remain in the area for weeks or months at a time, with breaks to return to their place of residence, then returning to their oil and gas fields. Workforce housing has helped to alleviate some of the strain on local rental markets in some areas, but its use is not widespread across all shale areas. One of the task force's primary research topics is the impact oil and gas development is having on affordable housing. The evidence the task force has collected so far suggests that the supply of available, affordable housing is often quickly absorbed by the influx of temporary workers. Some oil companies provide a housing stipend up to $1,000 per month, while other companies may directly lease up units, often at a much higher rental rate than local residents can afford. According to housing authorities in the Eagle Ford Shale area, as leases expired, current tenants had to vacate units for workers hired by oil and gas firms, subcontractors, and suppliers. During the past 2 years in the Balkan area, 2 Section 8 projects have opted out of their rental assistance contracts. One is a 30-unit project in Williams County, and the other is a 96-unit project in Ward County. After opting out, rent for a two-bedroom unit at the Ward County project increased by 126% to $1,100. In response to the sharp increase in rental rates in some oil and gas areas, the Office of Policy Development and Research developed a methodology for determining emergency exemption payment standards for impacted areas. Emergency payment standards may exceed 120% of the applicant's fair market rents. Approved housing authorities include Minot Housing Authority, Burleigh County Housing Authority, Foster County Housing Authority, McHenry and Pierce County Housing Authority, Montreal County Housing Authority, and Stutzman County Housing Authority, all in North Dakota, and Susquehanna County Housing Authority in Pennsylvania. The Bradford and Tioga County Housing Authority in Pennsylvania is expected to request approval for emergency payment standards soon. The current transportation and infrastructure, including bridges and highways in many of these rural areas impacted by oil and gas development, was not designed to accommodate the volume of heavy trucks and equipment accompanying oil and gas drilling. For example, the North Dakota Department of Transportation estimates that truck traffic on Route 85, which connects Williston in Williams County, Watford City in McKenzie County, and the city of Bowman in Bowman County, increased by 124% in 2011 compared with 2010. The Upper Great Plains Institute of Transportation at North Dakota State University estimates that an additional $907 million will be needed to maintain industry activity for oil-impacted roads over the next 20 years. In the Barnett Shale area, $342 million will be needed to fix or replace nearly 400 miles of road in DeWitt County, east of San Antonio. There are some data constraints impacting our research. The transient nature of this type of work omits workers from being counted where they are impacting housing markets. Job payroll data are available from the Bureau of Labor Statistics on a monthly basis. The data are based on a survey conducted by the Bureau of the Census, obtaining employment levels from employers across the country. These data are reported by place of employment and to include direct employment, which includes those employees of a firm which may contract them out to work on the site of another employer. Unless either the direct employer or the employer of record overseeing the actual site work is actually located with any particular shale area, it is unlikely that the jobs in an oil and gas area will actually be reported in the statistics for such county. Moving forward, the International Energy Agency forecasts the U.S. to become the largest global oil producer by around 2020. As oil and gas development and extraction activity increases, especially in rural areas, disruptions in local housing market areas may continue. Through the efforts of the Gas Oil Task Force, HUD now has a foundation for understanding the effects of oil and gas exploration and production on U.S. housing markets and HUD programs. With continued analysis, research, and experience, the task force is committed to developing a methodology for assessing the effect of oil and gas production on an area's existing housing stock, housing demand, homelessness, and HUD programs and resources. I'd like to thank the other gas oil task force members for their help in gathering data, including Steve Comodina, Tim McDonald, and Fernando Ramirez. Further, Sam and I would like to thank Don Darling and Beverly Harvey for their support and guidance. Please note that a link to the topical article published in U.S. Housing Market Conditions second quarter 2012 is available at the bottom of this slide. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sam and Tim. I had a couple of points I wanted you to elaborate on a little bit before we get to the discussion with the folks, the regional administrators in the field office. And then maybe take a couple of questions from the audience as well. First off, you talked a little bit about price volatility and the impact this can have on drilling areas, and the different products that are produced in the different areas. Could you talk a little bit about that? Like, I remember discussion about wet versus dry gas, and what are the sort of the controlling influences on the prices of the resources?
I can take that. The easiest way to think about it is that the natural resource in the ground is basically inventory for the company, stored inventory, and they can turn it on or turn it off at will to access that resource. And so as a price will increase, they can turn it back on and reach out for that inventory, or as prices decrease in the world market, they can leave it alone. And so, there's three primary different types. There's dry natural gas, there's wet gas, and then there's oil. And wet gas is really a mix or liquid. It can be either liquefied natural gas or it can be a mix of gas and oil. And those are typically more profitable, especially in today's market. Am I doing that right? Does that answer the question?
Sure, yeah. But gas, dry gas particularly, is a much more of a local product, right? And so it depends on what the local conditions are, and we're within the reach of its transportation, right? Whereas oil is more easy to transport internationally.
Yeah, there's a much more defined infrastructure for oil as opposed to liquid natural gas. Natural gas, as you mentioned, is more of local, regional, as compared to oil, which is a global product.
One of the things I've heard about the advent of all this very low-cost natural gas is that it's bringing manufacturing, or has the potential to bring manufacturing back onshore versus being offshored to places like China because of cheap labor. But that, in fact, so much manufacturing is energy intensive and not labor intensive that the cheap gas can mean more manufacturing back on the U.S. side. Have you seen any of that developing in any of these markets yet? Outside of
Pittsburgh, there are some plans to bring some new manufacturing in line. But as of right now, those plans haven't come to fruition, but that's something we're definitely keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I've seen reports, but nothing substantial in the data yet.
Okay. Which housing markets have had the biggest impact? That, of the ones you were outlining, which ones are currently having the most trouble right now?
I would say Western North Dakota, Williams County, at least for the areas that I'm particularly familiar with, have been dramatically impacted by this.
For the areas I've covered, it's mainly a lot of rural areas, not particularly one county, but just haven't experienced this type of development before, and they'll have the housing stock, the existing housing stock to accommodate. So they've had that's been a significant issue for them.
One more from me. You were talking about the statistical difficulty in measuring. Tim, you were talking about the statistical difficulty. Could you give us sort of an example of how that works and why it's a problem?
Yeah, I guess a basic example would be somebody who resides in Oklahoma and then would be shuttled around the country while their company is headquartered in, say, Houston or so, they wouldn't be counted in population estimates generated by the census, or they might not show up in the BLS payroll data.
Thanks. Any questions from the audience? Could you come up to the microphone, please?
Hello, Alistair McFarlane. I had a question about the first market that you discussed. You mentioned that there was a regulation, which was a moratorium on temporary housing. Could you explain sort of the reason behind that? Because it didn't seem to me that that would be the best response to the problem.
Yeah, and the first area was in Williston, or in the Bakken region in North Dakota and Montana. And the temporary housing most likely includes workforce housing, and in many cases it can be an infrastructure problem because they have to put these units out in the middle of nowhere in many cases. And so, and then there's the strain on the infrastructure when these people move into these workforce units. And so in some cases this is new, and so they're trying to balance this in the best way that they can.
It's like a water and sewage problem mostly, right? Because they don't have sewage facilities to handle 9,000 additional housing units that can be put up very quickly, right? Yeah.
I'm Caitlin Miller. I work in the voucher office in PIH, specifically on the HUD BASH program, and we've definitely heard from the field about problems that veterans have been facing finding housing, particularly in North Dakota and in western Pennsylvania. And I'm wondering, this is more, I think, Kurt, for you and your staff, in terms of, you guys recently released the FMRs, the FMRs for this year, I think.
Right, in around October 1st.
Right. So did you happen to look at shifts in the FMRs in these areas?
Well, yeah, FMRs are kind of a different, there's other issues there in terms of measuring things. You know, when these housing markets change very quickly, it's hard for the data to show up in the data sources we use, because there's a delay in collection, and when a market changes very rapidly, as can happen in these very rural areas, the design of the data is to collect it over the course of several years, and so we're just barely seeing the effect of this in a lot of markets. That's why we developed the emergency payment standard protocols for housing authorities to go beyond the usual regulatory constraints on where they can set the payment standard relative to the FMR, because we recognize that there's no way we can analyze data to support a particular number for the FMR, but that we let the housing authorities work it out through a payment standard adjustment.
So when do you expect, like, how long does it take for the FMRs to reflect?
Well, depending on the size of the area, our primary data source is the American Community Survey, and it breaks down areas into 3 size categories over which they release data. So any place with 65,000 or more people, we get data every year. If it's between 20,000 and 65,000, we can get data on a 3-year basis. And if it's below 20,000, it's only at once. You get data that's aggregated over the course of 5 years. So it gets updated every year, but only 1/5 of the observations change in the data. You can think of it that way. And so we don't see it. And most of the areas that are the most deeply impacted are these small counties below 20,000. All right, well, I'd like to move on now and hear from our regional administrators and field office administrators about what's going on from the HUD program perspective and what they're seeing, that's how they're working with the state and local governments in the areas that are affected by this activity and the rapid changes in their housing markets. We have, first we'll start with Jane Vincent, who's the regional administrator for Region 3, and the Marcellus Shale is her bailiwick, plus the Utica, because they're one on top of the other. Then we'll hear from Tom Leach over the phone. He's the field office director in the Columbus office. They're dealing with the Utica shale and the oil drilling issues in Ohio. Then we have Mark Brzezina from Region 6, and he's got several areas in Texas, the Permian Basin, the Eagle Ford shale. And then Rick Garcia from Region 8. They'll talk individually a little bit about what's going on in their areas, and then we'll have some more roundtable discussion. Jane, thank you.
Thank you very much. I always think in a conversation like this, it's incredibly important to get the backdrop of the economic data that we've just been hearing about. So I really appreciate getting to get this kind of overview to give us some context as we move forward in the conversation. In a practical way, what happens in the field is what I wanted to share with you. When I came on board just about 2 years ago, it wasn't too long into the time I got here that I was getting calls from some of the housing advocates in Pennsylvania saying the housing authorities are having a lot of trouble with their vouchers. The residents were not able to find places. The places that the landlords they had heretofore been working with were no longer renting to the voucher holders. Instead, they had all these workers coming in from other parts of the country to work the Marcellus Shale region. And when I chatted with our PIH folks, they said, no, we're not really hearing anything about that. Maybe it was a quirk in the data, but the data was showing the lease-up was fine and they were getting no complaints. But really a credit to the public housing staff. They started making a few calls to their executive directors, and the executive directors said, yeah, we're having trouble here, and we need some help. So with that, we actually started working in Pennsylvania with the Housing Alliance, who hosted a series of calls that we have now been on once a month for 18 months that has consisted of the Housing Alliance, so the advocates, the Public Housing Authority representatives, and really a field working group of us out in the Philadelphia regional office with EMAD included, public housing, multifamily, field policy and management, to try to talk through and identify, do we really have issues, and gee, what can we be doing about them? So some of the things you heard about here are very happily a result of what has come out. For instance, the emergency payment standard being approved in Susquehanna County as well as under review in Bradford, Tioga. So that's a really good thing. But in the meantime, we discovered a few other issues that are out there that just in terms of your practical day-to-day work out in the field, I guess you can say, that has come up. One is, in the past year, we participated in a federal conference on Marcellus Shale. It was very interesting. We had someone from the Philadelphia office who participated, and it included lots of representatives from other federal agencies. But these were the science-related agencies, if you will, and while we were looking at boom-bust philosophy and housing markets, and could we really find ways to house the lowest income among us who we are charged with helping, the people at the conference were just amazed that there was any above-ground issues, and they were just looking below ground. So that was a revelation to us, and I think a revelation to them as well, that this was more than just a science experiment, if you will. But indeed, the boom-bust and the science experiment really surfaces itself in some ways at the local and state government or political level, if you will. So a thought about that is the state of Pennsylvania is very excited about all this work going on in Pennsylvania. Lots of new jobs, more revenues coming into the state. This is a pretty good thing at a tough economic time that all these additional revenues are coming into the state. But on the downstream, the governor of Delaware is none too happy about this because of potential issues with drinking water, downstream drinking water issues. So that is above ground and a below ground issue, but affecting different states in different ways. And if any of you have followed some of the local newspapers, there's actually been a bit of verbal tug of war between the two state governments, which has been pretty entertaining to watch play out in the paper. So that is, I think, another indicator of just the push-pull issues that you get in neighboring states and in neighboring areas that are either benefiting from the economics or hurting from some of the potential environmental fallout. Other things that we have discovered is, as we were talking about, what is the effect of rents in the area? A little bit too soon to tell, but I can tell you that in West Virginia, some of our rural fair housing authorities have said, wow, our FMRs went up by $100 a month or several $100s a month, whereas as in Pennsylvania, which has been having difficulty housing its families, the fair market rents have decreased and made it a little bit more challenging indeed to find housing. Another one of the issues from a landlord issue, and we do even wonder if this is a bit of a fair housing issue, is that landlords have seen that, yep, I can raise my rents, I can start renting to folks who are essentially temporary workers, maybe a couple of workers who are doubling up and bringing some relocation money to the table from the companies that are hiring them, and they've decided to no longer rent to families. So that's a pretty serious issue from our perspective. In the midst of all this, what we've tried to do is to help move along a little bit of the data so that we can really analyze what's happening with rents and occupancy. So we partnered with the Reinvestment Fund, which is a nonprofit organization headquartered in Philadelphia, as well as the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania, to try to get more experience from housing authorities in the Marcellus Shale area. So this crosses state boundaries, and Tim, you probably know who we surveyed, but definitely Pennsylvania and West Virginia, and maybe into New York as well. Unfortunately, the results have not come back as strong as we'd like, so we can't really take advantage of data that we've gotten from that thus far. But that is a little bit of where we are, trying to now help the Housing Alliance as the lead, which is great that we have a nonprofit lead on this, both internal and external working group, as well as housing authorities, and then us from across the program areas in the Philadelphia regional office to see what other techniques we might be able to go after. Some of the things we are looking at is approaching the companies themselves and saying it's probably time for you all to chip in and help us find some temporary housing so that we can put relief on the local housing markets.
All right, thank you, Jane. Tom, are you on the phone? Tom?
Good afternoon. This is Tom Leach. I'm not hearing this too well, but I will just continue. We should be on the first slide, please. There's been much information and misinformation in our area on the issue. And our focus in Ohio and Region 5 has been to bring together federal, state, and local stakeholders, and advocacy groups to address not every issue, but a well-defined issue, the impact of the growth of drilling on the availability of affordable housing in the impacted areas. And PD&R has done an awesome job of showing the big picture. But out in the field, we focus on the state and local impacts. Our goal has been to engage our partners and stakeholders in a place-based way that helps to bring clarity to the issue, and with the use of visual tools like GIS, which uses authoritative, up-to-date data, it's much easier to see. Next slide, please. The growth of drilling is still small in comparison with North Dakota, Pennsylvania, and other parts of the United States, but the growth is not uniform in Ohio. Next slide, please.
I have the one with all the orange dots. Is that the one or this one?
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Big growth in Ohio. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, the growth is not uniform, and there's areas such as Carroll County, Ohio, which is rural, is experiencing a huge growth in drilling, and they are very limited in their resources. Next slide, please. I do want to mention that this is a tool that we use with our stakeholders called Got It, which is the GIS operational tool integrating technologies. But we're also very thankful and appreciative of all the work that PD&R does on this topic, including Rob Renner in GIS. Looking at these key impacts, this is basically what we've talked about already. Impact on housing choice voucher units losses, the impact on public housing and project-based Section 8, the single-family REO or lack thereof, payments for rental assistance that can help people, but we can serve fewer people, and of course the issue of displaced market rate renters, people that are already working and can afford their rents now but are being displaced. Next slide. There's a number of things that we can do to stay ahead of the curve on this. And one is to engage our partners. And we've hosted in Ohio, Doug Shelby in Cleveland, myself, Jim Cunningham in Cincinnati, have hosted a couple affordable housing forums and included other field offices, and appreciate the support from Ms. Vincent and Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Lubbock and Fort Worth and Helena and Albuquerque and, of course, headquarters. But we're also engaging with the Ohio Department of Development, the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, the Ohio Department of Commerce, Ohio State University, Ohio University, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and our other federal partners like the USDA and Department of Commerce. We've been working with our public housing authorities, the Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing, the Coalition on Housing and Homelessness in Ohio, the Ohio Poverty Law Center, and with engaging our elected officials on a staff level. So the main thing is we want to get people to work together. Next slide, please. The tool that I'm using is the HUD's Got It GIS tool, because it's very visual, and people can see clearly not only where the drilling is, but the proximity to other housing. Next slide. Basically, the value of what we're doing in Ohio and in Region 5 is of the forums and ongoing collaboration and communication. It's pretty clear. HUD hosts and leads these multi-state interagency public-private listening forums, and we learn from each other. HUD is seen as being engaged and as an issue leader. HUD provides outreach on these key issues to not only disseminate information, but to also sensitize our partners to the issues. HUD also provides these advanced GIS tools to help our partners to get a better place-based focus. And of course, HUD can better leverage the reach and resources of our partners to meet these goals. And we can accomplish much more when we all work together. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tom. Next, we'd like to hear from Mark Brazina from Region 6, the Fort Worth office.
Thank you. I want to talk about 3 different areas that we have. South Texas. Originally, it was a short term, but later on they found that there was more oil there. So it's really kind of changed the dynamics of the thing. Originally, when they first started, there was a kind of a rural area. There was no housing. It's a very tight housing market. There's been a significant impact, but most of the people that come in there are temporary workers. We have a lot of those. We have a lot of subcontractors. We have a lot of people that come in there for 3 weeks at a time and then go home and rest and come back. They're not bringing their kids much into the area, and not a whole lot of families are moving in. There has been a significant impact all over South Texas in the housing market. Of course, Section 8 vouchers, like what you talked about, are beginning to hurt. They're finding it a very tight market and no or little supply. One of the most difficult things that we've had there is no sustainable 30-year mortgage housing that you can get to a large degree, because many of the housing that they want to do is set up as temporary type housing, and you probably wouldn't be able to get an FHA loan out of it. The support services, food, automobiles, entertainment, and retail has gone through the roof in this area. And so it's a very, they need a lot of motels and hotels and RVs and anything they can get their hands on. So they thought it to be a short-term problem, and now it's turned into a longer-term problem because there's more oil that's been discovered there. Midland, Odessa is a little bit different. It is an old oil town, and it's seen a lot of booms and busts up and down. And they have some of the highest reserves in the 48 states, even though it's a mature oil area. The impact there has been a tight housing market, but they've got a pretty good housing stock, but there's very high rental prices there. They are providing a bunch of FHA rental housing, 221D4s, and it's a strong market. And so that seems to be going pretty well there, even though there are high prices. Some families are moving in there. Barnett, which is in the Fort Worth, Dallas area, is significant, and there are three really different, completely different ways of that it's being handled, I guess I should say. You got the rural market that is really in bad shape and needs a lot of housing. You have the Midland, Odessa area, which is part of the Permian Basin, which has got enough housing right at it, but the market's very tight. And then you go to Fort Worth and Dallas, and they're doing a lot of drilling and things that are going on, but it's not affecting the market at all. And the reason why is you've got a huge market there. And so it really hasn't had a real impact, nothing significant because of its size. So those are the three things that I want to talk about, because I think most everybody else has hit most of the other subjects. But we do have three. One thing I'd like to mention is Clovis, New Mexico is getting hit pretty good right now, and they're moving in a bunch of metal containers and using them as housing. So I've just learned about that recently. So that's all I've got.
All right, then finally we'll hear from Rick Garcia, from the Regional Administrator for Region 8.
Thank you, Kurt. Let me acknowledge and thank you, Kurt, and Gene for and PD&R for thinking about including the regional administrators in this panel. I think it's a unique opportunity for us to bring a local perspective. Although we may not all physically be in these basins, oil and shale basins or gas basins, literally every single day we do have people that are, and we do communicate with those folks on a regular basis. So it's great to be able to participate. A lot of what has already been shared about programs and functions, so I'm not going to repeat those things. I might just allude to them by my colleagues and also by the two economists' presentation. But let me just give you an overarching perspective of some of the bigger themes that I might see that are occurring in the Rocky Mountain West and specifically in the Balkan Shale Formation. There's no question that the Region 8 states have a strong orientation towards oil and gas exploration and production. They have historically. Just as Sam indicated, we have a history of boom and bust in the energy economy in the Mountain West. The good news is, and although I'm not trying to make a prediction here, but at least the economists and other elected officials believe that this particular oil and gas shale permitting period that we're experiencing in the Balkan is here to stay, and it's going to stay for a longer period of time than perhaps we've seen in the past. So with that understanding going forward, I think our work in the housing and development arena means that we need to take a longer term view of the kind of assistance and resources we're making available. Yes, there's an immediate need and sense of urgency if you're on the ground living in these communities, and the kinds of responses that have already been shared, emergency standard payment increases, housing forums, education, collaboration with other local, state, and federal governments are all the kinds of responses or resources that we are making available as well. But at the same time, there is a need for local governments, mostly in their local capacity, to run local governments, meaning that many of these communities are being directly impacted, say in the Balkan region. Frankly, some don't have even zoning codes available This is something that they really haven't had to face in the past. So from that perspective, I think there's a need for many of the typical coordination functions that most of us take for granted occur in many local governments, like finance, budget, planning, zoning, permitting, infrastructure, planning and development, community economic development, even basic housing development, service, commerce, and education. We need to help those local governments understand the revenues that they're generating going back to those local coffers and local governments need to be thought through in a longer term basis. Certainly they come to HUD primarily because we're the H in HUD, and there is an expectation that we have resources or we know how to do these things. The longer term view, in addition, is the how we can address the long-term affordable housing through various means. One of the unique elements in the Balkan region is the city of Minot. 2 summers ago was impacted directly by a major flood, which eliminated 25% of the housing inventory in that community. Minot is physically on the edge of the eastern edge of the Balkan Shell. I think it's safe to say that the Balkan Shell activity is not only impacting eastern Montana, where some of the development is occurring, not quite as rapidly, but I think it's easy to say that it's impacting the entire state. People, frankly, are living as far away as Bismarck on the eastern edge of the state and finding ways to commute to the oil and gas sites. The forums that I've participated in directly, and members of the field office staff, both in North Dakota and in eastern Montana, have included workforce development collaboration with local community colleges that are trying to provide the technical training and assistance for the industries that are looking for labor. The biggest challenge that those energy companies have is maintaining labor. Obviously, if someone can be attracted from a fast food restaurant at the wages that are being paid by the oil and gas industry, they're going to do that, but those individuals need the training. And that might be the better way if they already live there and have a home to build the local labor force. But the folks who are coming in and leaving over a period of shifts, which are, I think they go maybe 10 to 15 days, and then they're off for a week, and then they come back. A lot of those folks are frankly just living in temporary workforce housing. But it's having the kind of impact on the local community that both my colleagues have already expressed. One of the other unique elements that I'll add to the Balkan region is that HUD, through our Office of Sustainable Housing and Communities, did award a $1.5 million regional sustainable planning grant to a regional planning entity in western North Dakota, which actually has taken on the work of 19 counties that are engaged directly in trying to do a better job of what the impact of the oil and gas economy, the new energy economy, is going to be having in that area. So there is at least a group that's neutral. It's not driven by the oil and gas community. It's not exclusively being driven by local governments or elected leaders. It's a neutral group of 19 counties that's trying to do a better job thinking through the long-term impacts. And I think that's where agencies like HUD can probably have an opportunity, not just try to address these issues on an immediate basis, which we're doing, but to also help those communities think through their longer-term sustainable community development and provide the training and the education and those kinds of linkages. If I could go, I had one slide, it's a wrap-up slide. Sam had this in his, I just wanted to share this with you. Mark was talking about the containers. This is a $25,000 living unit that's on sale by Walmart in western North Dakota. That's a housing or shelter alternative to folks in need of housing. And they have these available on their parking lot. And as I said, you can pick it up. Those are 2 bunks there on the right side, some kind of lavatory in the back with some modest kind of galley kitchen services. But this is one alternative that somebody creative in trying to capitalize on the opportunities of a limited supply of housing is bringing to the marketplace. So we ask the question, is this where we want housing to go in this part of the country? And I think we all know the answer to that. So thanks.
All right, thank you. To start a little bit with the discussion, we talk about the immediate need versus the long-term view. Can you guys who have been looking at the industry tell us a little bit about the difference in the employment and activity levels between the exploration phase and the long-term production phase, and what has the industry been able to tell you anything? Or are they kind of keeping the secrets close to the vest? Because that is a big issue when this immediate need is enormous and very pressing, but is it going? How long is it going to last at the levels that you see initially when there's exploration activity?
Yeah, one of the first questions that we asked as a task force was to see if we could figure out if there was a number of an average crew size for a drilling rig. And unfortunately, there isn't really an average because it varies significantly. But the real employment bump comes in the initial drilling and exploration phase. And once the well moves to production, it's a much lower, it's a maintenance phase at that point. The tanks are filled, the truck comes in, loads up, and leaves. And so at that point, it's a much lower need for long-term employment. But those the drilling crew can move to other drilling areas.
Mm-hmm. One point I'd like to make here is that there's also the possibility of the oil prices going down. If the oil price is going down, we won't have a boom, and it could certainly affect anything that could happen. That could happen at any time. We don't know what the market's going to do.
I've certainly seen it in the gas already. There's relief in the areas that have primarily reduced gas, where the exploration activity has fallen way off. They're sort of at the level of production. They'll continue to produce, but they're not sinking any more new costs in until they see the prices go higher again. Let's see. Could you talk a little bit more about some of the infrastructure challenges that you're seeing in the local areas that you're helping them deal with?
Well, you actually alluded to a moment ago, just the basic water and sewer kinds of infrastructure needs that most of these smaller communities, one, don't have the local capacity to design and put this kind of infrastructure in place. That impedes, doesn't necessarily completely prevent, but it does impede, I think, private development from coming in. I mean, there was a major private housing market conference earlier this year held in Williston, and it attracted national housing market developers, some regional ones as well. But that was the biggest issue that was shared at that conference in Williston, was when can we have some expectations of when the infrastructure needs for basic water and sewer increases. Who's going to fund that? How's it going to get financed? Are going to be made available. I think there are groups ready to move in and capitalize on this on a private market basis. Our role, as I see it, is really to help preserve the affordable housing inventory. That's first and foremost, before that gets completely gobbled up just through the normal demand that's being put on housing. So I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges, and it's one of the ones that's probably going to take the longest period of time to actually get those kinds of processes in place, where there's confidence that the private building community has that there's going to be that kind of infrastructure.
Jean?
Yeah, I'd like to sort of chime in on that a little bit. One of the challenges with the infrastructure is trying to foresee the future, and whether or not this is just a short-term issue, or whether the local governments need to be providing increased infrastructure or new schools or whatever, depending on if there's going to be additional folks moving into the area. And as you were sharing, that may happen in the short term, and those are often temporary workers and they don't bring their families, but can you really bank on them in terms of supporting the infrastructure, the long-term infrastructure needs? And in terms of the housing need, one of the issues that has arisen in some communities, as we've talked about, in often cases these are in rural communities, is there may not be housing codes. And so you do hear stories of this pod may be an interesting alternative and may be, in many cases, in much better shape than what some of the high-priced apartments are actually going for. So there may be a need for housing condition improvements.
Tom, are you still with us?
I am. I think so a lot of these issues that have been brought up are excellent, and I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that it really depends on, the impacts depend on where you are, because in my communities, they're totally different than they are in northern Pennsylvania, and totally different than in North Dakota or Texas. So I think it's really important, once again, to engage all the local partners, to participate in all of their research projects, and to be fully engaged.
Could you give us a little description of those differences?
Sure. At our last forum, housing forum, Joel Mansky in North Dakota said, you know, Ohio is just starting and you are about 3 years behind where we are. And it's absolutely right. We are just getting the growth of housing, or the growth in drilling and drilling permits. But in North Dakota, rural northwest North Dakota, there just isn't a whole lot of housing to begin with. There aren't a lot of major cities to draw from. In Ohio, eastern Ohio, it may be an Appalachian area. However, they're always near Pittsburgh, near Youngstown, near Charleston, West Virginia, near Columbus, Ohio, near Cincinnati. So there's always opportunities. But the areas are unique, and that's what makes the housing challenges so unique.
So, Tom, while I have you here, you talked a little bit about the Housing Finance Agency there in Ohio. What are some of the state and local governments doing with regard to affordable housing?
We're working, HUD's working with all of our partners to promote affordable housing, which is not new. But what is new is we're actively engaged in working with the housing authorities on this specific issue. Antonio Riley, Regional Administrator, Region 5, came to Ohio and presented along with me at a meeting with all of the executive directors for the Ohio PHAs. And this is what we engage them on. We listen to what their issues are. We're working with the Ohio Housing Finance Agency and Ohio State University and Ohio University on research on identifying not just what the impacts are on affordable housing, but on infrastructure, employment, health, and environmental concerns.
Thanks.
I can add
sure.
to that in North Dakota, which is the Balkan region primarily, where local government, state government has been active for some time trying to address the issue. What can they do? We, HUD, and he mentioned Joel Mansky, who's the field office director in Fargo, is the guy on the ground in North Dakota that's engaging with the locals. But examples are the North Dakota legislature approved a housing incentive fund last year during an emergency session dealing with the flooding. It's a $15 million state tax credit program modeled very similar after our LIHTC, where individuals in the state can make contributions or investments and get a tax credit towards ensuring that new affordable multifamily housing exists in North Dakota. We've also continued to encourage the state government agencies that distribute community development block grant, home, and emergency shelter grants to think about earmarking dollars in those local areas that are being directly impacted by the housing shortage. So that takes a reallocation, a rethinking process of how those dollars that flow from the feds to the state level. In addition, someone asked the question earlier about the homeless issues. Clearly, there's an upside of oil and gas economy in these states, and there's also a downside. And many folks, some seniors, elderly, disabled individuals are being displaced. They typically end up on the street in some of the larger communities. So there has been a refocus in North Dakota on their homeless needs assessment, which they're trying to do a better job of redirecting the traditional continuum of care dollars that flow into that state to try to impact these populations more directly. And they've also embarked on a housing needs study, independent of what anybody else might be doing, or even some of the energy companies, to try to get a handle on what they think the 5, the 10, the 15-year housing need requirement is going to be. And what they've projected, at least with the population growth, is they're going to require 3,500 to 5,000 housing units each year to be developed to meet their growing demand. So I suspect that will be adjusted each year based on the kinds of permit growth that they're going to be experiencing.
In Pennsylvania, Tim reminds me that the impact fees in Pennsylvania, much of which are going into the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency for additional housing resources, they do have a request for proposals out right now, accepting proposals to develop additional housing. And in some related infrastructure needs, there's been at least one county, Butler County, where there was a water problem, and the impact fees were actually used by the county to drill some clean water wells that were donated back into the community. So that's another example of how those impact fees could be used.
As the Secretary said when discussing this issue with the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, it's a problem of success, right? We've got fabulous economic growth and opportunities here, but they generate problems, but we have a place to go to find the resources to solve those problems. I'd like to open it up to the audience. If there's anybody here who has a question they'd like to put to the panel.
Thank you all for your thoughts. I'm really intrigued by these sort of creative housing alternatives, the Walmart modular unit, the shipping container units. And I'm curious, are these legal in a lot of these places? Are they actually being installed or built?
Well, they are in Clovis, New Mexico. Something similar to it. Are they legal? Yeah, if they don't have any codes for that city or that county, they'll do anything. And I've seen, in some rural areas, I mean, you've got houses without bathrooms, so it happens.
Yeah, we're noticing that some of these small areas are just trying to wrap their hands around how quickly this is growing or not growing, and in some cases they're doing a moratorium or they're trying to put limits, and sometimes they're trying to define what a housing unit is for themselves, not at a HUD level, but at a local level.
I'm Liz Koch with PD&R. The only role HUD has in most of that is when FHA gets involved. And so when there is an FHA-insured unit, then HUD can require that it meet a local or state building code, but independent of that, we really don't have much of a role. I think that would be a very helpful research observation for field staff to come back to us with photographs when they run across instances like that, just so that we could understand better what the role is of alternative housing in boom or bust towns like this. And I'd like to hear from you. I appreciate the regional differences, and there are very strong ones, but what are either some of the lessons learned, or what can HUD provide to local housing suppliers, regulators, state and federal offices? What can we develop for you that would make this very difficult part of your job easier? What could you have known beforehand so that when it started, you would have felt better prepared in some way?
I'll mention just a couple of things before I turn it over to my colleagues. Lessons learned, you heard one of my aha moments in that meeting with some of our other federal partners, and how HUD was the only one at the table who was paying attention to the people, or recognizing that there could be and economic development impact. So that was, that was a pretty aha moment, and maybe that speaks to us at the federal level needing to continue to work with not just, I know each of us works with our counterpart regional administrators, but encouraging them to get that down to their field level. I did speak to my EPA counterpart, and he said, "Oh, are you involved in that issue?" Even though we're working together on SC2 and sustainability issues, and keep each other informed pretty well. This one did not dawn on him, and he's a pretty savvy guy. So that was a lessons learned. In terms of things that I think we could use in the field, it really is alternatives that we could give to our public housing providers, which are having all this difficulty housing their voucher holders. We came out with training about what are all the alternatives. We had info sheets that went out to the public housing authorities. We've got this new tool that was developed with the rent changes, and those were all incredibly helpful. But that's a note in advance, and I suspect a similar kind of issue as you look at some of the lack of rental resources in New York and New Jersey as a result of Hurricane Sandy. They're not there anymore. What are the alternatives we have to create something quickly, or to make what's out there that's probably too expensive for our FMRs available to us on an emergency need?
I think it's a great question, and is kind of right off the top. And my exposure to the Section 8 side of the challenges that public housing authorities have had in relatively rural part of my region, eastern Montana and western North Dakota, has been relatively new, but these are smaller housing authorities that don't have a lot of capacity in terms of professional staff and resources. So they do have to lean heavily on us out of our Region 8 central office. So if we can provide more upfront information, they know now, I'm not sure how much they knew before about the payment standard exception opportunity. Fortunately, that can be approved up to, I think, 120% or 25% of the.
I think we can go up to 135.
But I think the
really
120 or
tight.
25 is at the
Yeah.
regional level.
Yeah.
I think you have to go to headquarters beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
So if some of that could be streamlined, I think that would be beneficial. One other thing that it's probably not a standard that is used routinely, takes a little bit of prodding and probing and cajoling. But if some of the economic data that's been used for vacancy rates and available housing inventory is limited, and it is often through the ACS survey data that they're required to use for the FMRs in smaller rural parts of my region, there could be special tools used to create more direct, deeper data, as I like to refer to it, through random dial surveys. That costs dollars, but it could make a big difference in the life of a smaller housing authority in these areas that can continue to make their Section 8 program work for the residents that they're expected to do.
Yeah, actually, we're working on that right now. I got one today, came in my mailbox, was supposed to go to the contractor, but the form came to me, but we'll take care of that.
But that's an example. I know that doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but that's another tool I think that if we could exploit more routinely, at least in very rural parts of the country, and that part of my region is, I think it's a pretty meaningful opportunity for those local public housing authorities.
Any other questions from the audience?
Sure, Tom in Columbus.
Sorry, Tom? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I also want to emphasize, while this is a great employment boom, the folks that are in our housing aren't necessarily the skilled workers that are being employed and, going on to self-sufficiency. The big thing that I think about is the potential gains to our housing authorities and to our multifamily partners in particular from the potential leases that are provided to other types of landlords and landowners. So I just want to mention that. Also, that may be something that PD&R can identify the potential value of that. Also, in the rural areas, like in Ohio, there's a much greater share of non-conventional rental-type housing, including mobile homes, RVs, and vans, and a much larger supply of substandard housing. So that's why in rural Ohio, it's very difficult to find more housing choice voucher landlords, for example. Thank you.
Taking a look at the northern portion of North Dakota, you may recognize that the Blackfeet Nation settled with the Interior Department a long-standing problem that they've had. Out of it came a bank. There's a Blackfeet Indian bank. And the question first is, are they approved as a HUD mortgagee, HUD-approved mortgagee, so that they can insure homes on the reservation, which runs from northern North Dakota into Canada? And then the second half of that query would be, are we working with or looking at the concerns of our Canadian partners as it relates to housing, since the oil in the Williston Basin is coming from both Canada and northern North Dakota?
I don't know about the details of that bank. I do know that one of the reservations in eastern Montana, they have a community college. It's the Fort Belcamp, if I'm saying that right, reservation. They have a community college that participated in one of the eastern Montana housing and workforce development forums that I participated in. And there's a population of Native Americans that experiencing 20-25% unemployment rate that are in the basin. And it just seems like a natural opportunity to train residents of the reservation at the community college for oil field work, because they live there. So that's the connection that I think they're trying to capitalize on right now in that part of eastern Montana.
I'd like to raise an issue that I actually don't know too much about, but we've been a lot talking about the rental side and the supply demand. I know when I took my economics classes, I used to see those charts, and when I did my own market research, I didn't do those charts anymore. I liked spreadsheets instead. But one of the things that has come up, and in Tom's comment about drilling, that does provide some potential income for some of the public housing authorities if they can actually have a site to drill on their own land. There are some land use issues that you may be aware of. For instance, because of you heard the description of how some of the drilling happens, you can go down here and then sort of go out under somebody else's property. So there's a little bit of a question about who owns the lease. And then if you really get into it, and if you are a homeowner and you are having a lease, really with the oil company to do the drilling on your property, and so you're getting some revenue from that, there may be issue with some of the lenders about the need to subordinate your mortgage to the lease. So that's probably a place where that's going to be involved with our FHA side of the house.
Any other questions? Any things you guys wanted to elaborate on? Anything? Well, thank you very much for participating. It was a very interesting panel. It's a challenging issue that we'll all be dealing with for a number of years. And we thank you for your ideas. We'll keep trying to provide the kind of research and support that you all need in the field to help communities deal with the issues that they're facing here. Jean?
Yeah, I'd
like to thank everyone's participation today, and the panel discussion was very interesting and very informative. And we're delighted that all of you were able to join us today. And please join us in a nice round of applause. And our next quarterly will be on March 7th, and we're going to have our quarterly housing market update as well as a panel discussion on inclusionary zoning. So please join us, and happy holidays to you. Thank you very much.